loves, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read in the month of August. That is a total of 24 books, 3,635 pages, 97.18 hours of audiobook, with an average rating for all of that at a 3.71. Like always, we will start with the book that I gave the lowest rating to and make our way up to the best book that I read in August. The lowest rated book for the month was Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This is a thriller novel about a man who moves back to his childhood home. And when he was a child, he was sleeping in a tent with his best friend in his backyard. And when he woke up, there was a slice in the side of the tent and his friend was gone. And they never were able to find where his friend went. And then as an adult, when he returns to the house, he starts feeling a presence of his friend. So he starts to investigate what happened to his friend, and it kind of switches between the events that happened in the past during the summer that the friend disappeared, and then also the current narrative of him trying to investigate through his insomnia and his nightmares what happened to his friend. I didn't like this book. I gave it a 2.5, so that's probably pretty obvious. It felt like the author took the concept of Stranger Things and was like, I could do that better, and then couldn't. There's even like a parallel institute level thing, like some out of bounds lab that they sneak into, and just, it wasn't good. The interesting part of Stranger Things is the like weird upside down part. If you took that out of the narrative and just focused on the first season where the kid's gone, that's what this was, and it had the most mundane explanation as to what happened. I didn't like it. It got a 2.5. Sorry, Riley Sager. You started to redeem yourself with whatever the previous one was, only one left, and you've lost me again. Next, at 2.75, we have Deadlocked by Charlaine Harris. This is the 12th book in the Sookie Stackhouse series, the penultimate one. In this, the king comes to town to investigate the assassination that happened in the last one, and they're partying at Eric's place when a body is found by the cops on his lawn, and Eric is kind of accused of being responsible. And then we also continue the plot line from the previous books that Sookie has this fairy artifact that can grant you a wish as long as it's done in the pursuit of true love. And as has come very cliche for Charlaine Harris, those two plot lines are intertwined. This one got a 2.75. The whole woman is dead and either Soups or Jason are blamed is a very repetitive plot for the books at this point. There's no new characters, there's no new locations, so there's not really anything exciting about this one. We're 12 books into the series. To keep interest, you have to keep things fresh, and it's getting repetitive. So I have one book left in this series, and then I'm wrapping it up, and I think at this point I'm ready to be wrapped up. Also at a 2.75, we had Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. This is about a couple who get to move into this fancy building on subsidized rent, and they also recently have had a child, and the childbirth left the mother in a wheelchair, unable to walk. This one got a 2.75 for me because it is entirely about new motherhood and dealing with the trauma of like childbirth and all of these things that I just have zero interest in reading. I'm sure that a lot of people will love this book, but this book, not for me, will never be for me. I have no motherly instincts. I have no interest in even reading about other people's motherly instincts. Did not like this book. Maybe if those are themes you are enjoying in your books, Nestlings might be for you. It does have a little bit of a horror element with what happened to the previous residents of this subsidized housing, and this woman who like lives across the hall and is constantly crying and maybe trying to kill herself. I found some of those elements interesting, but I also just couldn't put up with a lot of the other stuff. And also those supernatural elements were very similar to a movie that I watched like a week before I read this, which was Cuckoo. If you liked Nestlings, I would recommend the movie Cuckoo. You'll probably like that one too. Moving on to the books that I gave a 3.25 stars to. The first is 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This is a book about a man who wrote a blog post of the 8 perfect murders in the history of literature. And then the FBI shows up at his door because someone is making their way through that list, and some of the victims have a connection to this bookseller who wrote this blog post. This got a 3.25 for me. I did enjoy some of the plot elements. It was a little annoying that they spoiled a bunch of books, which I haven't had a chance to read. So now I know how those murders were carried out because I was spoiled for it 8 different times. But what lost a lot of points for me here is I hated the main character. He was just so insufferable and acted like he was so much smarter than literally everyone, and I couldn't stand him. I was annoyed by every decision he made. I was annoyed by his tone of voice, and that lost a lot of points for me in this book. So 3.25 because there were some interesting elements of the plot, but throw the whole man in the garbage. Another 3.25 was Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei Brenya. This is about a dark future where inmates can participate in life or death game, and if they excel well enough in this tournament, they are promised that they will be let off of their sentence. So we follow a few different characters who are participating in these games to try and have their sentences commuted. This was a lot more about revolution and teamwork than the narrative that I thought it was going to be, that would have been a bit more individualistic of a character trying to win. And I did enjoy elements of that. I did just find some of it a little hard to follow at times, which might have been my own fault because I was doing the audiobook. There were like these inserts of different characters, and I got very confused trying to figure out which ones were characters that were also going to be in the rest of the narrative and I had to keep track of, and which were just there for flavor. So it got a 3.25 for me. This is one I'm like, maybe I would have liked it better if I had read it physically and not like a super fast audio. Also to 3.25 is Ghost Radio by Leopoldo Gu. This is narrated by Pedro Pascal, so I obviously did the audiobook for this one. This is about a man who has a radio show in Mexico where he tells horror stories from people who call in. There's also hints of something bad happening to his friend when they were younger and broke into a radio station. Obviously, based on the title, there's ghosts involved here. This one was mediocre. Like, none of the elements stood out to me as bad, but none of them stood out to me as great either. It was just a story. The best element of this was Pedro Pascal. The final 3.25 is The Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. This is the 5th book in the Trials of Apollo series. It's finished, the series is done. This one got a 3.25. I still have the same concerns that I did with some of the previous ones. We don't build up the characters enough to have any kind of emotional stake in them. It has a tendency to explain what the plans are and then not actually show any of the action. This one had a bit more action, but obviously that's expected because this is the climax and the final battle that we've building up for 4 books towards. I don't know what it is about the Rick Riordan books that don't have Percy in them. This series overall was a miss for me, but I'm also not the audience of a middle grade series, so take that with what you will. Books that I gave a 3.5 to. The first one was Hardcore Logo by Michael Turner. So throughout this month, I have been working on this like summer reading program my library was doing where you had a bingo card and you had to mark things off. And one of the challenges you had to do was read something from the poetry and play section. So I basically just went to the library and scanned the shelves, saw what called out to me. And I picked up Hardcore Logo, which is a poetry book about this band who had a dramatic breakup, and now they're like getting together for a reunion tour because some of the members need some money. And it's kind of a mixed media book, so you get like news articles, you get the lyrics of their songs, you get like transcripts from voicemails, and there's also some poetry thrown in. This is the book that actually the band Billy Talent got their name from. I enjoyed the format. I thought that was a lot of fun to have all of these different things. I did enjoy the kind of baseline narrative of a washed up punk band getting back together, but the actual story of it just was kind of mediocre. It didn't really do anything surprising. I did enjoy a lot of the references to different like Canadian venues. There's a reference to Lee's Palace in here, which is iconic for being in Scott Pilgrim, and also I went there last year to see Keanu Reeves, so is going to have a special place in my heart forever. The story just was nothing extraordinary. It was pretty predictable. Next 3.25 is Will Destroy the Galaxy for Cash by Yahtzee Croshaw. This is the sequel to Will Save the Galaxy for Food. So in the end of that one, our main character comes into a bunch of money, but beginning of this one, he's basically blown most of it. So he is trying to get a job on this like ship that's going to explore other galaxies. So he is looking into how to do that when he gets invited to do a heist on the character we had in the first book. I don't know how much I can talk about those specifics without spoiling the first one. So he's called to do a heist, and obviously things go wrong from there. I did like this one better than I liked the previous one because it was less misogynistic, and I think that was only because there were like a single woman in this entire book. Heist takes place during like a nerd convention. I enjoyed while reading it, but it's not something I would necessarily recommend to other people. It very much has a certain tone to it that is very like 2012's internet, specifically like gaming circle 2012 internet. I enjoyed the narrative of it. The character kind of sucks though. I'm done that series now. Next is Vampire Weekend by Mike Chen. So I was actually in a bookstore and this cover caught my eye and didn't know enough about it to actually purchase it, but I did then get it out from my library. This is about a vampire who works at a blood bank, so she keeps herself in blood while also trying to make it as a punk rocker. And then a relative from her past shows up and she has to try and keep her secret while also trying to find a new source of blood because the blood supplies are drying up. This was a very punk narrative, but it came off as a little cliched of like beginner communist. I don't know how better to describe this. Very much stressing the collective and community care, but in a way that didn't come off as very genuine. I could see the potential, but I don't think the author pulled it off in a very genuine way. And another book that I read for my library's summer reading challenge was The Hunger and the Dusk. This is a graphic novel. The prompt I was crossing off was something from their summer reads list. This was a short one I could cross off very easily because I was running out of time. This is about orcs and humans who used to be for centuries and centuries at war, and then they ally together because there is a new threat that has come in that's even more deadly. And the way they try to secure this alliance is to have an orc marry a human. I see the bones there. I see the potential. The first one just didn't blow me away. The human group that they chose is like a very specific mercenary band. It wasn't anyone actually like connected politically, which made this read like someone made a comic of their personal Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which could be interesting. Obviously, like Critical Role is very successful. This just seemed like someone trying to get that same success without having the names behind it. I might pick up a sequel of this just to see where it goes, but first volume just didn't stand out to me. Moving to the 3.75s, the first one is a nonfiction, and that is Hey Han by Emily Lynn Paulson. This was a nonfiction book about MLM's multi-level marketing scheme and is very much a memoir of the author's personal experience being pretty high ranking in the MLM that she was a part of, and how even to the people who are succeeding, the negatives that being in an MLM has. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it a 3.75. It was very helpful to get the perspective of someone who did succeed in an MLM and how it was still harmful for her. I did very much feel for the author and the struggles that she went through. There were some call-outs in the book to the intersectionality between MLMs and how they exploit specific communities, specifically communities of color. But the author, as a white woman, obviously doesn't have the personal experience, and this did focus a lot more on her personal experience. I think some inserts or interview or something with someone who is an expert from a more academic field, because this is a nonfiction book, could have really padded this out and made it a lot more beneficial. But I think it is an important book to exist for people who don't know about MLM and need to know how they work in the behind the scenes, for people who are maybe thinking of trying to get out of an MLM so they can see the perspective of someone who has the personal experience, and then also for people who do succeed in their MLM to get the perspective of someone on their same level who, yeah, you're succeeding, but also how much are you sacrificing to get that success, especially if you are recruiting other people who aren't doing as well as you are. 3.75, I did enjoy this book. I just wish it had included a bit more academic side and intersectionality, so maybe a conversation or an interview with someone who had a different experience than the author. That really would have pushed this up for me. Another nonfiction book that I read in August also got a 3.75, and that was Unlikable Female Characters by Anna Bogutska. This is about the unlikable female character trope in media and the different subsections within that trope. So there's like the mean girl and the witch, the things like that. I did enjoy this. It got a 3.75. I like what it was saying. I liked the media analysis. There were just some points that the book started to feel just like plot summaries of different movies, particularly the intro section. I think they were trying to give you some background context on the movies before they got into the analysis, and that just got real bogged down for a while because it was long. Honestly, I don't know, maybe I just have a bit more experience with media than the most average person, but a lot of them I was like, yeah, I know the plot of Mean Girls. I know the plot of Gone Girl. You do not need to spend 5 minutes of this audiobook explaining to me who the characters are. Like, is there someone who doesn't know who Regina George is, even if you haven't seen Mean Girls at this point? It was like a good hour of this 11-hour audiobook was just like, here's the plots to different movies. It felt like the kind of media analysis that I would read on Tumblr. And the last 3.75 is Spy Family Volume 6. Spy Family is about a spy who needs to have a fake family in order to infiltrate an evil person he's trying to stop. And each of the people in the family are keeping secrets from each other and have their own reasons for being in the fake family situation. So the father, obviously, he is the spy. He's trying to infiltrate this. The mother is trying to get her brother off her back about not being married and all of her co-workers to stop setting her up. But also she's an assassin and hasn't told anyone. And then the little child that they adopt, Anya, is a mind reader, and she knows that the mom is an assassin and the dad is a spy, but she hasn't told anyone that she has mind reading powers. So in this 6th volume, the spy has to try to win a tennis tournament. There was a lot of time dedicated to that one. It was interesting. I thought the way that they animated it and the different ways that the other teams were trying to cheat was really interesting. But the strength of this series is the little girl, Anya, and she wasn't in this volume nearly enough. That got a 3.75 for me. At 4 stars, we can knock out 3 right in a row because I read volume 2, 3, and 4 of Capless Gamer, and all of them got a 4. This is a manga series about a woman who is addicted to gaming who ends up adopting a kitten, and she approaches her new kitten motherhood as a way to level up both herself and her cat. I've read all 3 of these. I'm not going to be able to distinguish in my brain which one was which, but all of them were 4. The art is so cute. I like the little gaming references and the way that she conceptualizes the world through video game metaphors. There's one where she starts to actually make a friend. She's been someone who's like really isolated, but she like befriends the shopkeep from the pet store. She also adopts a second cat in the 4th one, who's also even cuter than the original cat, and just I enjoy these so much. I am allergic to cats, so I can't have a cat myself. I can live vicariously through these books, though. They're just a little cozy fun thing. When I need something light on my brain, let me look at some cute cat drawing for all 3 of those volumes. I also gave 4 stars to Skull Daddy by Stephanie Ann. This is a short little horror book, independently published, about a little kid who becomes obsessed with this like ram skull Halloween decoration that she calls Skull Daddy. The skull starts talking to her and weird things start happening around the house. So this covers the year between when they get the skull and a year later, the parents of the little girl just absolutely suffering through the tantrums that this demon-fueled child has. I enjoyed this because this is how I see children. Yeah, they are constantly throwing tantrums about fucking nothing. That's why I don't want children. Read this. This is why I don't want children, okay? Some of the horror elements were pretty gruesome. I did enjoy the different ways that each of the mothers were suffering through this child. And I definitely thought the ending was gonna go a very different way. So this one got a 4 for me. Because it is independently published, there were like some formatting issues I had with it, but I read it in an afternoon and I had a good time. Okay, 4.25, we have 2 books here. The first is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is a romance novel where the main character inherits an apartment from her aunt, and the apartment has this thing where it sometimes slips in time by 7 years. So she ends up going back 7 years to a time when she was traveling with her aunt and a man was staying at her aunt's apartment, and she ends up falling in love with him. I give this a 4.25. I don't know. I think I was in some kind of emotional squishy mood throughout August. You can't think too hard about the time travel element and the paradoxes that would cause, but I enjoyed it as a concept. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the writing style. I just enjoyed this. I did have some differing expectations going into it because for some reason, based on reviews, people were treating this like it was an exception in romance. And while this did have some elements that analyzed grief, as the main character is obviously dealing with the death of her aunt she was very close to, I don't think that's anything that I haven't seen done in a romance before. It didn't seem to me like anything that would exclude this from being a romance book like any other romance book, but I enjoyed it. So a 4.25, I did also enjoy the elements that were analyzing grief. Another book I gave a 4.25 was a classic. Who is she? I read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka as an audiobook because it was the last day of the month and I'm like, I need to get at least one more done. And it was like 2 hours. Sometimes I do feel like I've been turned into a bug in the morning when I'm like, I have to get up and do my job, but I'm stuck here on my back. And it was honestly a very interesting day that I chose to read that because it was the same day the story broke about the woman who like died in her office and no one noticed for 4 days. So the fact that the very first thing this guy worries about when he wakes up as a bug is like, oh no, I missed the train to go to work and then my bosses are gonna know that and they're gonna come look for me. And they did in the narrative. His bosses did come looking for him because he missed a single day of work and like they end up firing him. I thought it was an interesting parallel between like maybe in the old timey days your bosses would come looking for you, but for now they're just like, oh, you're sitting at your desk for 4 days? Not even gonna notice you died. The person in me who would love to not have to work for a living loved this. Metamorphosis. It's well written. I did like some of the relationship between the main character and his sister, but the rest of his family were jerks. So I got this a 4.25. A very rare classic that I actually enjoyed. Moving on to the 4.5s, and we have 2 more books that were for my library's reading challenge. One of them was to read a local history book, so I am not going to say what book that was because that gives away where I live, but it was a 4.5. It was about the history of my city's libraries, and I thought that was really cool and really fun. Very relatable for me. I enjoyed that. And the second one I had to read was a very special picture book, so they did have a list of what they considered to be special picture books. So the one I read was Minette's Feast, which is about the history of Julia Child told through the perspective of her cat. It was very cute. I do enjoy Julia Child. I'm not a chef myself, but I do love a woman with a big personality, which Julia Child was, and I thought it was kind of cute to do it from the perspective of the cat. And she did apparently very much love her cats, so that was fun. It's been a while since I've just picked up a picture book. Like, obviously I read graphic novels, but like a picture book intended for children. It was kind of a very nice brain break. I enjoyed that. I know people are gonna probably think I'm padding my numbers by including a picture book in here, but it is something I read, so it counts. And the third book at a 4.5 stars, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. Got it in the first try. This is by Brandon Sanderson. It is part of the Cosmere Secret Projects. In this one, the main character wakes up in medieval England with no memories and only the scattered pages of a handbook about surviving medieval England as a wizard, which is promotional materials for a service where you can basically buy exclusive access to a parallel dimension where it is medieval England. There are going to be slight variations on what they believe in, who conquered who, things like that, but the basic framework of medieval England is going to be there. So our main character wakes up there and he has to try and figure out like who he is, what's he doing, and also dealing with like the weird things that are going on in this specific version of medieval England. This got a 4.5. I didn't connect with the main character until like the last 30 pages, so that knocked some points off for me, but Brandon Sanderson's world building, his writing, his brain, absolutely astounding to me. That gets a 4.5, the lowest I've given Brandon Sanderson of the 3 I've read so far, but definitely I still enjoyed it. It definitely leans more sci-fi than fantasy, but it was still an enjoyable read, so 4.5 for that one. And the highest rating I gave out in August was a 4.75, an almost perfect. And I'm almost embarrassed that this is my top rated. Bride by Ali Hazelwood? This was my first Ali Hazelwood. I've not read any of the thinly veiled Reylo fanfiction, but I did enjoy Bride. I am a vampire girly. I grew up on the cheesy vampire romances, so you're always going to be able to get me with a werewolf vampire story. This is my first not romance, considering I was part of the Supernatural fandom. Absolutely astounded it took me until my 30s to get there. I liked the vampire werewolf intrigue parts. I liked the writing, which surprised me. So, Bride by Ali Hazelwood is about a vampire who has been selected by the Vampire Council to enter into a strategic marriage with the alpha of one of the werewolf pack in order to ally with them against the humans. The vampire has her own motivations for agreeing to the marriage because her best friend, who's a human, disappeared, and she thinks that the werewolf clan might have had something to do with it. I don't know how to defend myself on this one. I had a good time. I was kind of in a reading slump. I was in the middle of a book that I was debating DNFing and was like, let me just try reading something else and see if I'm in the mood once I finish it to get back to the other one. Ended up DNFing that book and enjoying this one. So that is how my month went. If you made it to the end of this video, leave the vampire emoji for Bride in the comments, or let me know what the best book you read in August was. If you enjoyed, like this video and consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.